Rain wouldn't stop. It poured like the sky was crying with her. She held her baby close, using her own clothes to cover the child, though she was soaked to the bone. Her hands shook from the cold. Her lips were turning blue. People rushed past her like she didn't exist. Some stared, most looked away. She whispered, "Please, just a little help." But no one listened. She was tired, so tired. Just when she thought she couldn't take another second, a long black car slowed down beside her. The window slid down, and inside was a man in a warm suit, dry, rich, untouched by her kind of pain. But something in her eyes made him freeze, and for the first time in years, the billionaire's heart cracked open. What he did next would leave her in tears, and him facing the one truth he'd buried for decades. The sky had been gray since morning. Clouds hung low, heavy, and silent, like they were holding back tears. But by noon, the rain came down hard, cold, steady, and without mercy. Sophie stood near the corner of Main and Franklin, her back pressed against the wall of a closed grocery store. Her hair was soaked. Her clothes clung to her body, wet and heavy. She had no umbrella, no jacket. Just her arms wrapped tightly around her baby girl, who whimpered softly in her arms. Her name was Mia. Just 6 months old, barely able to sit on her own, Sophie had wrapped her in the only blanket she had, a faded pink one with frayed edges. But it wasn't enough. The cold still found its way in. Sophie's fingers trembled as she rocked Mia gently, whispering words only a mother would say. "Shh, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's trying." Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Mia had barely had anything, just a bit of formula left over from a stranger's kindness the day before. Sophie had watered it down to stretch it, but it wasn't enough. Mia's cheeks looked pale, and her tiny hands felt too cold. People passed by with umbrellas. Some glanced at her, most didn't. A man in a navy suit walked by, talking loudly on his phone. A woman in the workout clothes pushed a stroller and crossed the street without looking her way. The cars rolled past, sending splashes of rainwater into the air. Sophie stepped out from under the small shelter and into the rain, holding Mia closer. Her shoes were worn out and leaking. The cold soaked through her socks. Her lips trembled. She raised her hand slightly toward a passing man. "Excuse me, sir, please. My baby's cold. I don't want money. Just some food. Please." The man avoided her eyes and kept walking. She turned to a couple standing under a shared umbrella. "Ma'am, I just need something warm for... please?" The woman's smile faded the moment she saw Sophie's appearance. They stepped around her without a word. Sophie didn't cry. She had no more tears left. She had cried through the nights, through the morning, through every time she watched Mia shiver in her arms. She was too exhausted to cry now. The rain poured harder. She stood there for another 15 minutes, hoping, praying. Then a black car turned the corner and rolled up to the light in front of her. It was sleek, shiny, and too perfect for a place like this. The kind of car she used to see in movies or parked outside five-star hotels. Her heart beat faster. Maybe this one. Just maybe. She didn't step forward. She didn't want to beg again. But her legs moved anyway. Her mother's instinct was louder than her pride. She reached the edge of the sidewalk, shielding Mia with her arms. The car didn't speed past. It stopped. The passenger window rolled down, smooth and quiet. Inside sat a man in a dark suit. He had a sharp jaw, gray eyes, and a calm face. His hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place. He looked clean, warm, dry, like he belonged to a different world. He stared at her for a moment, not in judgment, not in pity. It was something else, something searching. Sophie lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I don't mean to beg. I don't know what else to do. My baby hasn't eaten and she's cold. Please." She started to turn away, ashamed. But then the man spoke. "Wait." Sophie turned back, blinking through the rain. He looked at Mia, then at her. "Where's her father?" She hesitated. "Gone," she said quietly. "He left when I told him I was pregnant. Said I ruined his future. I haven't seen him since." The man's jaw tightened. He looked at Mia again. "How long have you been out here?" Sophie hugged Mia tighter. 3 months. I lost my job. Then the apartment. I've tried the shelters, but they're always full. I sleep wherever I can." He nodded slowly like he'd heard this before, but his eyes stayed on hers. Then something unexpected happened. He opened the car door. Sophie's breath caught. He stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. The drops hit his suit, but he didn't flinch. He walked toward her, calm and quiet. He took off his jacket and gently placed it around her shoulders. She flinched at first. "Sir, please don't. You'll ruin your clothes." "Keep it," he said. The jacket was warm. She hadn't felt warmth in days, not like this. He looked down at Mia. "She's freezing." Sophie nodded quickly. "She hasn't stopped shivering." He turned toward the car and spoke into a small device on his wrist. "Bring the emergency kit and a thermal blanket. We have 2 passengers." Sophie blinked. "You're helping us?" "Yes." She took a shaky breath. "Why?" He paused for a long time. The rain ran down his face, but he didn't seem to notice. Then he said, "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing." She stared at him, not knowing what to say. A moment later, another man in a driver's uniform came around the car. He carried a first aid kit, a clean blanket, and a bottle of warm milk. Sophie gasped and clutched Mia. "It's okay," the man said softly. "We're not here to hurt you." He helped her into the back seat of the car. The leather was warm. The air smelled clean. She sank into it like she hadn't sat in a real seat in months. The driver handed her the bottle. Mia took it with trembling lips and began to drink slowly. Sophie couldn't stop staring. The man got in across from her. He didn't speak at first, just watched Mia as she drank. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," he said. "Just let her get better. What's your name?" "Jonathan," he said. "Jonathan Reed." Sophie nodded. "I'm Sophie." There was a silence for a moment. "I have seen you before," he said. Her eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes, same corner, about a week ago." She looked down. "I try to move around so the police don't bother me." He nodded. Sophie pulled the jacket tighter around her. Her fingers were finally warming up. She looked at Mia. The baby's eyes were open, and she looked better already. "You're really kind," Sophie said. "Most people. They don't even look at me." Jonathan leaned back, his eyes still fixed on Mia. "Most people forget what it's like to be desperate." Sophie tilted her head. "You don't seem like someone who ever had to struggle." He smiled faintly, but there was sadness in it. "Looks can lie." She didn't push further. She was just grateful. As the car moved through the city, Sophie stared out the window. Everything looked different from in here. Warmer, safer. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "To a doctor first," Jonathan said. "Then somewhere safe." Sophie nodded, too tired to question it. For the first time in a long time, she let herself relax. The noise of the rain faded. The cold slipped away. She looked at Jonathan one more time and whispered, "You saved us tonight." He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, eyes distant. Then he said, "Maybe you're the one saving me." Sophie didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But soon, she would. And when the truth came out, it would change everything. If you've made it this far into the story, it means something about it has touched you, and that truly means the world to us. Watching people connect deeply with our stories is what keeps us going. Your support, by liking, commenting, sharing, and especially subscribing, motivates us to create even more meaningful and emotional content for you. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and give this video a like. Every action you take encourages us to keep bringing stories like this to life. Now, let's continue with our story. The car moved slowly through the rain, the windshield wiper sweeping back and forth like a quiet heartbeat. Inside, everything felt still, quiet, almost unreal. Sophie sat curled up in the back seat, her baby Mia resting against her chest, finally asleep. The bottle was now empty, and the little girl had stopped trembling. Her tiny lips parted as she breathed softly against her mother's skin. Sophie didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat was tight, her chest heavy. She just kept staring at her baby, trying to believe this moment was real. Warmth, safety, a dry seat, kindness. After months of cold floors, wet nights, and ignored cries, it felt like a dream she wasn't ready to wake up from. Across from her, Jonathan sat with his hands folded, his eyes focused out the window, but his mind clearly far away. Sophie studied him quietly. His expensive watch, his clean shoes, the quiet pain behind his calm expression. He looked like a man who had everything, and yet something about him felt broken. She cleared her throat gently. "Thank you again. I still don't know why you stopped, but I'm glad you did." Jonathan looked over, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. "You remind me of someone," he said. Sophie waited, but he didn't say who. The car pulled into a quiet street. The houses here were big, but not flashy, peaceful. There was a tall gate that opened slowly as they approached. The driver drove through and parked near a cozy two-story house with warm lights glowing through the windows. Sophie looked at Jonathan, confused. "Where are we?" "My home," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "I can't stay in your house. I'm just—" "You're a mother," he interrupted gently. "You need help. That's enough for me." The door opened, and the driver returned with a large umbrella, holding it out as Jonathan stepped out. Then he turned to help Sophie. She hesitated. Her legs were still tired. She hadn't walked on dry ground in days. But she adjusted Mia in her arms and stepped out slowly. The rain still fell, but under the umbrella it felt distant now. Jonathan led her up the front steps and opened the door. Warmth wrapped around her like a blanket the moment she stepped inside. The living room was calm, decorated with soft lights and cream-colored furniture. It smelled like cinnamon and wood. Not like a billionaire's mansion. More like a real home. Sophie stood still, afraid to move. She didn't want to mess anything up. Jonathan turned to her. "You can sit. Really." She nodded shyly and walked over to the couch, slowly lowering herself and Mia onto the soft cushions. She looked down at her baby's face. The blanket Jonathan had given her was now wrapped tight around Mia's body, and her breathing was steady. A woman walked into the room holding a towel and a change of clothes. "This is Clara," Jonathan said. "She helps around the house." Clara was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a soft voice. She knelt beside Sophie and whispered, "Let me take the baby for a moment, just so you can change and dry off." Sophie shook her head quickly. No, I can't let go of her. Clara smiled. You don't have to. I'll bring you something warm for her, too. You both need to get out of those wet clothes. Sophie nodded slowly. Thank you. Minutes later, she found herself standing in a small guest bathroom with a fresh set of clothes, a loose sweater and leggings that smelled like clean laundry. She hadn't worn dry, warm clothes in weeks. She undressed quickly, dried off, and slipped into them, her skin already grateful. When she returned to the living room, Mia was still asleep on the couch with a tiny blanket over her, and Clara sat nearby, gently patting her back. Sophie sat down next to her daughter and touched her cheek. She's okay, she whispered. Jonathan sat in a chair across from them, a mug of coffee in his hand, untouched. Sophie looked at him again. Why are you really doing this? He stared at his mug for a long moment before answering. When I was 10, my mom and I lived in our car. My dad had left. We had nowhere to go. She'd park behind grocery stores and run the heat when it was too cold. We survived on canned soup and old sandwiches she'd saved from her shifts. Sophie blinked, stunned. One night, a woman knocked on our window and asked if we needed help. My mom almost said no out of pride. But something in her gave in. The woman gave us a room in her house for a week, just 1 week. And that week gave my mom enough rest to find a better job. It changed everything. He looked up at her now. Sometimes all it takes is one person caring. That's why I stopped. Sophie's throat burned. She looked down, her eyes stinging. Thank you for telling me, she whispered. I don't know what I'd have done if you hadn't stopped tonight. Jonathan leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. What was life like before this? Before the streets? Sophie let out a soft laugh, but it was full of pain. I was a preschool teacher. I loved it. I loved my kids. Then I got pregnant. The father, well, he wasn't ready. Said I ruined his life. I tried to keep working, but morning sickness made me miss too many days. They let me go. She paused, swallowing hard. I sold everything I had to keep the rent paid. Then the bills came. Then eviction. I tried shelters. I tried churches. Some helped a little. Most didn't have space. She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. The worst part wasn't the cold. It wasn't the hunger. It was watching Mia cry and knowing I couldn't do anything. That's the part that broke me. Jonathan looked like he was holding something back in his eyes. He cleared his throat and stood up. I want you to stay here, at least for now, he said. Sophie stared at him. What? No, I can't stay in your house. I'm a stranger. You're not anymore. She shook her head. What will people say? What if someone thinks I don't care what people think, and you don't owe me anything. Tears slid down her cheeks now. She didn't wipe them. I don't know how to live like this anymore, she whispered. I don't even remember what hope feels like. Jonathan sat back down, and for the first time he leaned closer. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just rest. Let yourself breathe. Sophie looked at her baby, so peaceful under the soft blanket. Then she looked at Jonathan, the stranger who had given her more in one night than anyone else had in months. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight. He nodded. For as long as you need. Later that night, Sophie was given a guest room. It wasn't fancy, just a clean bed, a lamp, and a dresser. But to her, it was everything. She laid Mia down beside her, kissed her forehead, and curled up next to her daughter. As she closed her eyes, the rain continued outside, but it didn't feel so heavy anymore. And for the first time in months, Sophie didn't cry herself to sleep. What she didn't know was that this night would not be the end of her story, but the beginning of something much deeper. Because Jonathan had secrets of his own. And soon Sophie would discover that their meeting in the rain wasn't random at all. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the guest room. Sophie stirred, her body aching in places she had forgotten could ache. But it was a good kind of ache, like her body was finally letting go after holding itself too tight for too long. She turned and saw Mia still asleep beside her, tiny hands curled into fists, lips slightly parted, breathing steady. For the first time in months, Sophie smiled at the sight. She slid out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her daughter. Her feet sank into a thick rug. The room was still, safe. It smelled faintly of lavender. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. The rain had stopped. The sky was pale blue. She could see birds hopping across the lawn outside. The world didn't feel so heavy anymore. A soft knock came at the door. Sophie turned. "Come in." Clara stepped in with a tray. "Good morning, sweetheart. I brought some tea and toast for you." Sophie blinked, overwhelmed again by the simple kindness. "You didn't have to." "Honey, of course I did." Clara smiled warmly. "You've been through enough. Let someone take care of you for once." Sophie nodded, her throat tight. Clara set the tray down on the dresser. "Mr. Reed is in his office, if you'd like to speak to him later. He didn't want to disturb you. Said you needed rest." Sophie whispered, "Please tell him thank you again." Clara gave her hand a gentle squeeze and left. Sophie sat down and picked up the cup. Her hands wrapped around the warmth like it was life itself. She took a small sip, then a bite of toast. She closed her eyes and breathed. Later that morning, after dressing Mia and changing into the clothes Clara had left for her, Sophie ventured out into the hallway. The house was quiet. The walls were lined with calm artwork and bookshelves. She walked slowly, carrying Mia in her arms. She passed the doorway and stopped. It was slightly open. Inside was a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows, wood shelves filled with books, and a desk near the far end. Jonathan sat there, typing on a laptop, his brow furrowed in thought. Sophie knocked gently. He looked up and immediately stood. "Hey, come in." She stepped inside. "Sorry. I didn't want to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," he said, closing his laptop. "How's Mia?" "Sleeping again. She's warm. I think it's the first time she's felt warm in a long time." He nodded. "I'm glad." Sophie looked around the office. Her eyes landed on a small photo frame sitting on a shelf behind him. It was turned slightly away, but something about it drew her in. "Can I ask, who's in that picture?" Jonathan hesitated, then turned the frame around slowly and handed it to her. Sophie looked down. A woman with chestnut-brown hair and soft eyes was holding a little boy. They were both laughing, frozen, a moment of joy. The boy couldn't have been older than 5. Sophie felt something crack in her chest. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Jonathan took a slow breath. "That was my wife. And my son." She looked up sharply. "Was?" "They died," he said quietly. 3 years ago, car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light." Sophie covered her mouth, her heart dropping. "I was supposed to pick them up that night," he continued. "But I got caught in a meeting. Told her I'd be late. Told her to go ahead and take a cab. It was raining. I should have been there." Sophie walked over and sat down beside him. "I am so sorry." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I shut down after that," he said. "Buried myself in work. I didn't want to feel anything. Couldn't bear to go into their room. I even stopped visiting their graves for a while." He looked over at her. "Then I saw you on that corner, standing in the rain, holding your baby, and it was like—" He stopped, searching for the words. "It was like I saw my wife all over again." she would have stopped too. She was the kind of person who'd bring stray animals home and feed people on the street even when we didn't have enough. Sophie's eyes welled up. "You miss her." "Every single day," he whispered. They sat in silence for a moment, the grief stretching between them like a thread, hers fresh and raw, his old and still aching. "I don't think I know how to be okay anymore," Sophie said softly. Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her. "Then maybe we can figure it out together." A tear rolled down her cheek. She nodded. He stood. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She followed him down a hallway and into a room that hadn't been touched in a long time. It was a child's room. The walls were light blue with little stars painted across the ceiling. A crib sat into the corner. Toys were neatly lined up on shelves. Books with bright covers sat on a small table. Sophie froze at the door. "This was—" "My son's room," Jonathan said. He walked over and picked up a stuffed elephant. His name was Ethan. He loved animals. We used to sit right there and read together every night. He placed the elephant in Sophie's arms. I kept the room just as it was. Couldn't bring myself to pack anything away. Sophie's voice trembled. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think this room should be used again." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you and Mia don't have anywhere else to go, and I have more rooms than I can count. I can hire a doctor, a therapist, a job coach, whatever you need." Her eyes filled with tears. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're trying. I know you love your daughter more than life itself. That's more than a lot of people can say." Sophie clutched the stuffed elephant to her chest. "What if I mess it up? Then we'll start again." She lowered her head, tears falling freely now. "Oh, no one's ever believed in me like that." "Well, I do," Jonathan said. "You've carried a baby through homelessness, through cold nights, through hunger. That's strength I can't even begin to understand." He reached out gently and touched her arm. "Stay, for however long you need. No expectations, no strings." Sophie sobbed quietly, nodding. That night she sat in Ethan's room with Mia on her lap, rocking gently in the chair by the window. She whispered to her baby, "We're not alone anymore, sweetheart. We're safe now. Mommy found someone who cares." And somewhere deep in her soul, a seed of hope began to grow. But what neither of them knew was that the past had not let go completely. There was still more pain to face, and one unexpected truth was about to shake everything. Days passed, and life inside Jonathan's home began to settle into a rhythm Sophie never thought she'd feel again. Each morning started with sunlight slipping through the curtains, the gentle hum of Clara making breakfast downstairs, and the soft cooing of Mia, now more rested and full of life. Sophie found herself smiling more, breathing deeper, sometimes even laughing. She started helping Clara in the kitchen. She cleaned. She folded laundry. She didn't want to feel like a guest, even though Jonathan kept telling her she didn't owe him anything. But deep down, Sophie felt the need to give something back. At night, after Mia was asleep, Sophie and Jonathan would sit in the living room with warm drinks and quiet stories. Sometimes they talked about grief. Other nights they talked about dreams. Jonathan had a way of listening that made Sophie feel seen. And when he smiled, it wasn't the cold smile of a billionaire. It was the soft, quiet kind that came from a man who had known great loss and still chose to be kind. One evening, Sophie sat on the back porch while Mia napped. Jonathan joined her with 2 glasses of lemonade. They sat in silence, watching the wind blow through the trees. "I haven't felt this peaceful in a long time," she said. He looked at her, his eyes gentle. You deserve peace. She turned to him. So do you. A long pause followed. I've been thinking, Jonathan said, about creating a foundation. Something to help single mothers like you. Not just money, but real support. Housing, training, safety. A chance. Sophie's eyes widened. That's beautiful. I want you to help me run it, he said almost shyly. She blinked. Me? Yes, you. Who better to lead it than someone who's lived it? Sophie looked down, her hands trembling slightly. I don't have a degree. I've never worked in an office. You have something more valuable, he interrupted. You have heart. You know what it means to survive. That's what matters. Sophie felt tears welling up. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They smiled at each other. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But there was something real in that moment, an understanding, a shared wound, and the slow, quiet healing of two broken souls beginning to find home in one another. But just when things felt too beautiful to be true, life did what it often does. It threw a stone through the window of peace. 3 days later, Sophie was in the front yard with Mia when a black SUV pulled up. 2 men in suits stepped out. One of them walked toward her, holding a large envelope. Are you Sophie Lane? She nodded, heart already racing. I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a tip about your situation. I'm afraid we need to speak with you and inspect your daughter's living conditions. Sophie froze. What? No, I don't understand. What tip? She's fine. We're safe now. The man didn't smile. Ma'am, please come inside. We'll explain everything. Jonathan came outside frowning. What's going on? We received a report about a minor child living in an unregistered arrangement with no legal custody documentation. Jonathan stepped forward. She's a guest in my home. The child is cared for, safe. I can provide anything you need. The agent gave him a tight smile. We'll still need to conduct an investigation. Inside, everything felt like it was falling apart. Mia began to cry. Sophie held her close, her own heart thudding like a drum. Who reported us? She whispered. The man didn't answer. That night after they left, Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. I don't understand, she kept saying. Why now? Who would do this? Jonathan paced the room, furious. It's a lie. I'll fight it. I'll get the best lawyers. No one's taking Mia away. But Sophie knew something he didn't. Deep down, she had always known this peace might not last. The world had never let her rest for long. She looked at him, eyes heavy with fear. What if this is punishment? For not being enough? For getting pregnant? For falling behind? What if the world's just trying to finish me off? Stop, Jonathan said, kneeling in front of her. Look at me. You are not a failure. You are not broken. You are a mother. And that is the bravest thing in the world. Sophie sobbed into his shoulder. I can't lose her. She's all I have. You're not losing her, he whispered. But neither of them slept that night. The next morning, things got worse. Jonathan's assistant called. Sir, she said carefully, I think you should know. There's an article circulating about you. Someone's leaking false information, accusing you of taking advantage of a homeless woman, saying you're keeping her and her baby hidden for inappropriate reasons. Sophie was sitting nearby and overheard it. Her stomach turned. Jonathan's voice was calm but cold. Handle it. I'll issue a statement. And tell the lawyers to prepare a defamation suit. After he hung up, he turned to Sophie. I'm so sorry. No, she said. This is my fault. I brought this into your life. He shook his head. Don't say that. The world is cruel, but we don't have to be. She lowered her head. Maybe I should leave. No. What if it ruins your name? Your business? I don't care about my name, he said firmly. I care about you and Mia. I won't let anyone tear that apart. Tears spilled down her face again. Why are you doing this for me? Because someone once gave my mother a second chance. And because when I look at you, I see someone I admire. You don't even realize how strong you are. There was a long pause. Then he said softly, and because maybe I care about you more than I expected to. Sophie's breath caught. Before she could answer, Mia began to cry. Sophie picked her up, holding her close, whispering comfort. In that moment, the chaos faded. There was only this little girl, this fragile piece, this fragile lump. 3 weeks later, the investigation closed. No wrongdoing found, no danger, no neglect. Everything dropped. But the damage had been done. Sophie had spent nights terrified she'd lose her daughter. Jonathan had spent days fighting lies and gossip. But through it all, they had stood together. And that changed everything. On a quiet afternoon, Jonathan took Sophie and Mia to a small memorial garden. There, beneath a tree, was a bench with 2 names etched into it, Lily and Ethan Reed. Sophie placed a small flower beneath the bench. I wish I had known them, she said. Jonathan looked up at the sky. I think they would have loved you. She looked at him. I think I love you. He turned to her, eyes full. I know I do. She laughed through her tears. It's crazy, isn't it? Maybe, he said. But I've learned that the most beautiful things often grow from broken ground. They stood together in the garden, Sophie holding Mia, Jonathan holding her hand. Not as a billionaire and a homeless woman, but as 2 people who had been broken and chose to heal together. Months passed. The foundation they started became real. Mothers found homes. Children found safety. And every time someone asked Sophie how it all began, she would smile and say, one night in the rain, a man stopped to care, and that changed everything. She never begged again. She never felt alone again. Because kindness had found her, and love, real love, had finally come home. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep sharing these powerful stories that remind us of the beauty of kindness, hope, and second chances. Let us know in the comments what part moved you the most. And remember, love can show up when we least expect it.